She collapsed on the sidewalk in front of the health clinic with a plastic bag in her hand and a crumpled receipt in her pocket. Nobody stopped. 2 people walked around her. A man looked through his rearview mirror and sped up. A woman in a beige coat pretended to check her phone. Katura stayed there, her cheek against the cold concrete, trying to breathe slowly, waiting for the world to stop spinning. It was not the first time. She knew exactly what was happening. She had donated blood earlier than she should have. The doctor had asked her to wait at least 8 weeks. She waited 6. And only 6 because she could not wait any longer. There was something inside her that simply would not let her. Katura was 31 years old, worked 6 days a week as a cleaning assistant at a private hospital, and every single month without fail, crossed the city by bus to reach the blood donation center in the old neighborhood, filled out the forms in small and careful handwriting, and extended her left arm with a calmness that the nurses found strange in someone so young. The first time had been by accident. A year and a half earlier, she had been waiting for the bus when she saw a banner taped to the wall of a pharmacy, AB negative blood. Urgent. Save a life. She was not sure what her blood type was. But she went in, asked, discovered it was exactly that, and left 2 hours later with a bandage on her arm and a strange feeling in her chest that she did not know how to name. She came back the next month. And the next. And the one after that. She never asked who the blood went to. The clinic did not say. She never wanted to know. There was something about the anonymity of it that she liked. The idea that there was someone somewhere who was still alive because of her, without knowing it, without owing her anything, without needing to thank her. A connection that existed without needing a name. But that day, lying on the sidewalk, her arm still sore from the bandage, she finally wondered if she was overdoing it. The answer came from her own memory, quick and uninvited. 3 weeks earlier, she had arrived at the clinic on the right date, at the right time, with exactly 8 weeks completed. The nurse who attended her, a short-haired woman named Dorinya, who already knew her by name, had paused when she looked at the system and said, in a voice different from usual, "Katura, this shipment was critical. You have no idea." She said nothing more. And Katura did not ask. But she kept thinking about those words for days. Critical. What was critical in a hospital? What was urgent enough to change the tone of voice of someone used to seeing blood every day? She was still thinking about it when she fainted on the sidewalk. A hand touched her shoulder. A girl around 12 years old, wearing a school uniform, was crouching beside her with a small bottle of water in her hand. She said nothing. She just opened the cap and offered it. Katura drank. Sat up slowly. Looked at the girl and wanted to say thank you, but her throat tightened shut. The girl stayed there until Katura managed to stand up. Then she picked up her backpack and walked away without asking for anything, without waiting for praise, as if helping someone on the sidewalk were the most natural thing in the world. Katura kept watching her until she disappeared around the corner. There was something in that which she recognized, but still did not know how to name. She picked the plastic bag up from the ground. Inside it was a container of rice and beans that was going to be dinner for her and her mother, and walked to the bus stop with slow steps, controlling her breathing. That night, while serving dinner to Dona Inez, who was lying in bed because of pain in her joints, her mother looked at her with that motherly way of seeing everything without needing to ask. You donated again before the right time. It was not a question. Katura did not answer. She served the plate, pulled the chair closer, sat beside her, and stayed there in silence. Who is this person, Katura? Her mother asked more softly. I don't know, she said. And that's why I keep going. If you are enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments what you thought and which city or country you are watching from. That helps a lot. On the other side of the city, behind a pane of glass that cost more than Katura's yearly salary, a man looked at his sleeping son and tried to remember the last time he had slept more than 3 hours straight. Renato Castellan was 43 years old, owned a medical technology company valued at more than $2 billion, had 3 apartments in different countries, and a 6-year-old son whom doctors insisted on treating as a problem with no definitive solution. The boy's name was Teo. Teo had curly hair, a way of laughing that involved his entire body, and a rare blood disease that had been diagnosed when he was 18 months old. The technical name was long and full of consonants that Renato had memorized in the 3rd week, repeated to 15 different specialists, researched in 4 languages, and tattooed into his memory with the precision of someone who knows that forgetting one detail can be costly. Teo's condition required regular transfusions. His blood type was AB negative, one of the rarest in the system. Finding compatible donors was, in the words of the hematologist in charge, a constant exercise in logistical miracle. Renato hated that expression. He hated anything that depended on miracles. He had built an entire company on the idea that medicine did not need luck, it needed data, systems, investment. He had funded research, hired the best specialists, installed a complete clinical room inside the apartment so that Teo would never need to stay hospitalized longer than necessary. But AB-negative blood could not be manufactured. There was no technology for that yet. And every time the supply reached its limit, there was a window of hours, sometimes less, in which all of Renato's money was worth absolutely nothing. That night, he was looking at his son because 3 days earlier Teo had gone into crisis. It was not the first one, but it was the worst. The medical team had worked for 11 hours. Renato stayed in the hallway for 11 hours. He did not sit down. He did not eat. He remained standing, his hands in his pockets, staring at the closed door as if looking hard enough could change something on the other side. When the doctor came out and said he was stabilized, Renato went to the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the cold ceramic floor, and stayed like that for about 20 minutes without being able to do anything. Nobody saw that. Renato was the kind of man the world always saw standing. Always with an answer. Always with the next step. The image he projected was built with the same care he put into the company's products. Efficient, reliable, without visible flaws. But there was one thing that had haunted him since Teo's crisis. A question he could not answer with data or money. Where had the blood come from? The hospital had a protocol. The blood bank had suppliers. There was a chain. But inside that chain there was a person. A real person with a name, with a life, with an arm that had voluntarily stretched out so that their blood could reach his son. He had never thought about that before. 4 years, the blood had arrived the way other things arrived. Through the system, through the process, through the protocol. Renato paid. The hospital managed it. The blood appeared. For the first time after the crisis, he had asked the blood bank coordinator a simple question. Had this blood come from a voluntary donor or from a paid bank? The answer had arrived the next day, in writing, with the coldness of a report, recurring voluntary donor. Same source code for approximately 12 months. 12 months. Renato read that line 3 times. There was someone donating blood every month for a year. Voluntarily. Without payment. And part of that blood, maybe all of it, there was no way to know for sure, had sustained Teo during that time. He could not sleep that night. He stayed in the armchair in his son's room, the report open on the tablet, staring at the alphanumeric code that represented this anonymous donor. There was no name, no address, no face. There was only a code and a frequency, monthly, regular, continuous. Teo moved in bed, murmured something in his sleep, and went back to breathing slowly. Renato looked at his son for a long time. Then he looked at the code on the tablet. And for the first time in many years, he felt that there was something in this city he did not understand, could not control, and could not buy, and that this something was the only reason his son was still alive. Katura woke up at 4:40 in the morning to the sound of rain hitting the window, and the thought that she needed to replace her sneakers before the sole completely glued itself to the floor. It was not the kind of thought that should occupy someone's mind at 4:40 in the morning. But it was the kind of thought that appears when the mind is full of heavier things and the brain finds a small escape to breathe. She stared at the ceiling for a few minutes. Then she got up. Katura's routine had a logic of its own, built over years of necessity. Wake up early, make coffee, check her mother's medication, separate her work clothes, eat something standing in the kitchen, close the door carefully so as not to wake Dona Inez, walk to the bus stop with her head down when it rained and with her head a little higher when it was sunny. That day it was raining. She arrived at the hospital 40 minutes before her shift started, because she had learned that arriving early was the only way to control something in a place where everything was unpredictable. She changed clothes in the locker room, picked up the cleaning cart, checked the products, and started with the East Corridor, always with the East Corridor, because it was the longest and she preferred to finish near the exit. It was in the East Corridor, that morning, that she heard the name Teo for the first time. She was not listening on purpose. She was wiping the baseboard when 2 doctors walked by talking quickly, one with his coat open, the other with a clipboard under his arm. They did not look at her. They never looked. Teo needed 2 more units this week, one said. I know. The father is pushing for a more permanent solution. There is no more permanent solution for this. He knows that. He knows. But he doesn't accept it. Their footsteps faded down the corridor. Katsura kept wiping the baseboard. Teo. She did not know who he was. She did not know how old he was. She knew nothing beyond that loose name in a conversation not meant for her. But the name stayed. That week, she started paying attention in a different way. It was not nosiness. It was something more instinctive, like when we feel we are close to an answer without knowing what the question was. She began noticing things that had always been there but that she had trained herself to ignore in order to keep working. The conversations in the corridors, the repeated names, the faces of the families who showed up every day. That was how she saw Renato for the first time. He was in the pediatric wing corridor, wearing a suit, holding a phone, speaking softly but with a tension in his jaw that she recognized from far away. It was the tension of someone used to solving everything and who had found something that could not be solved. She walked by with the cart. He did not look. But she looked at him for a second, and then looked at the room door behind him, which was slightly open, and saw a hospital bed with colorful side rails, the kind used in children's rooms. She kept walking. 3 days later, Dorinya called. It was not common. The donation center did not call donors unless there was a specific situation. Katsura saw the number on the screen and felt something tighten in her chest before answering. Katsura, I needed to let you know. The protocol changed here at the center. Starting next month, we'll need renewed medical authorization for donors with reduced intervals. You'll need to go through an appointment before your next donation. There was something in Dorinya's tone that was more than just information. Is there something wrong with my blood? Katsura asked directly. A brief pause. Not with your blood, no. But you fainted last week, Katsura. We know. She closed her eyes for a second. Someone had seen. Or someone had told them. I'm fine, she said. I know you're fine. But the protocol exists for a reason. After hanging up, Katsura sat on the edge of the bed for a while. Dona Inez was sleeping in the next room. The rain had stopped. The street below was wet and quiet. She thought about the name she had heard in the corridor. Thought about Dorinya saying critical with that different tone of voice. Thought about the man in the suit with tension in his jaw standing in front of a children's room. There was no way to know for sure. But something was slowly fitting together, like pieces we find separately and only realize belong in the same place when we put one beside the other. Katsura opened the wardrobe, took the folder where she kept her documents and donation receipts, every single one, organized by date, and stared at them for a long time. 12 receipts. 1 per month. For an entire year. She still did not know what she was going to do with this realization. But she knew that something was about to change, not because she wanted it to, but because certain truths arrive when they choose, not when we are ready. The call came on a Tuesday at 6 in the morning. Katsura was still on the bus when the phone vibrated with a number she did not recognize. She answered because she always answered unknown numbers. She had learned that ignoring them could be costly when your mother was sick. The voice on the other side belonged to a woman, formal, but with something tense beneath the formality. I need to speak with Katsura. This is from Sao Benedito Hospital. It was not Dorinya. It was someone from administration. Someone who used the hospital's full name as if it were a shield. This is she, Katsura said. Can you come to the hospital before your shift today? There is a situation that requires attention. She explained nothing further. Hung up before Katsura could ask. She arrived 40 minutes early. The woman from administration led her through a different corridor than usual. Quieter, carpeted, with softer lighting. The kind of corridor Katsura knew only in passing, when she cleaned quickly and moved on, because there was an unspoken rule that cleaning workers crossed that space but did not belong in it. The room had a long table. 3 people were seated there. The hematologist she recognized by sight. The blood bank coordinator, whom she had never seen in person. And a man in a dark blue suit whom she recognized immediately. The man from the corridor. The tense Joel. The father. Renato Castellan stood up when she entered. That surprised her. Nobody stood up when Katsura entered a room. There was a silence of several seconds in which no one knew exactly how to begin. It was the doctor who spoke first, with the careful voice of someone who had rehearsed. Katsura, we identified you through the recurring donor tracking protocol. There is an urgent medical situation involving a patient compatible with your type and donation frequency. We need your help, but before that, Mr. Castellan asked to speak with you personally." She looked at Renato. He was not holding his phone. He did not have the posture of someone used to leading meetings. He was standing with his hands at his sides, and there was something on his face that took her a second to identify because it was not an expression she expected to find on a man like him. It was gratitude. Raw, uncomfortable, unwrapped. "My son's name is Teo," he said. "He's 6 years old. And there is a real possibility, not confirmed but real, that your blood has reached him during the past year." Katsura said nothing. "He went into severe crisis 10 days ago," Renato continued. "And he went into crisis again last night. The doctors need an emergency donation within the next few hours. The bank has no compatible stock left. You are the only active recurring AB negative donor in our network." There was an implied question there that he could not bring himself to ask directly. It was obvious that he was not used to asking. It was obvious that this cost him something. Katsura took a deep breath. "I'll donate," she said. Just like that. Renato closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, there was something different in them. But then the blood bank coordinator placed a folder on the table and said carefully, "Katsura, we need to be transparent. You fainted 3 weeks ago after an early donation. Clinically, the recommendation is to wait another 2 weeks before." "I'll donate," Katsura repeated, in the same voice. There was no hesitation. No performance of courage. It was simply the same logic that had taken her to the donation center 12 times in a row. There was a child who needed help, and she could help. The doctor asked her to undergo rapid tests first. She agreed. While waiting for the results, she sat in a corridor different from the ones she usually cleaned, staring at her own hands. That was when Renato appeared and sat in the chair beside her. He did not speak immediately. They sat in silence for almost a minute. "Why do you donate every month?" he finally asked. It was not an executive's question. It was a father's question. She thought before answering. "Because my mother got sick when I was 22 and needed a transfusion. And someone she never knew saved her life. I never found out who it was." Renato stayed quiet. "So you've been doing this for a year because of something that happened almost 10 years ago," he said slowly. "I do it because it's the only thing I can do that doesn't depend on how much money I have," she answered. The silence after that was different. Heavier. More honest. The donation happened that morning. Teo stabilized in the hours that followed. And that afternoon, when Katsura went to pick up the cleaning cart to begin her shift, the supervisor called her over to say that Mr. Castellan had called and requested a meeting. Not with administration, not with the hospital board. With her. Specifically with her. The meeting was scheduled in a room that Katsura normally entered only to clean. She arrived in her work clothes because she did not have any other clothes appropriate for that kind of meeting, and she had decided on the bus that she was not going to pretend to be something she was not. If Renato Castellan wanted to talk to her, he was going to talk to her exactly as she was, with the uniform with the worn-out shoes, with hands that smelled like cleaning products even after washing them 3 times. Renato was already there when she entered. This time there was no one else in the room. He stood up again. She noticed again. There was an envelope on the table. She looked at the envelope before sitting down. She did not ask what it was. She waited. "Teo is fine," he said first. "The doctors say the crisis has passed." He asked about the drawing he made last week and got upset because someone stored it wrong and bent one corner. There was a small smile at the corner of his mouth when he said that. The kind of smile that only appears when someone is talking about a person they love in a way that does not fit into words. Katsura felt something loosen in her chest. "I'm glad," she said. And it was simple truth, without ornament. Renato pushed the envelope toward her. "I want you to accept this. It's the least." "No," she said before he finished. He stopped. "You didn't even open it." "I don't need to open it to know the answer is no." Renato looked at her for a moment. Not with irritation, with something closer to genuine confusion. The confusion of someone who had spent his entire life solving problems with resources and had found someone for whom that simply did not work. "Why?" he asked. Katsura thought about the right answer. Not the beautiful answer, not the answer that would sound good if someone were recording. The true answer. Because if I accept it, this becomes a transaction. And I don't want it to become a transaction. I want it to continue being what it always was. What was it always? She looked directly at him. The only thing I've ever done in my life that had no price at all. The silence after that lasted a long time. Renato stayed with his elbows on the table, his fingers interlocked, staring at the envelope she had refused without touching. Then tell me what you want, he finally said. Because I can't just do nothing. Katsura took a deep breath. She had thought about that too, on the bus. She had thought about whether this moment would come and what she would say if it did. There's a woman on the 3rd floor who has worked as a janitor for 11 years and still doesn't have health insurance through the hospital. There's a nursing assistant who was fired last month because he asked for time off when his son had surgery. There are 3 CNAs on my shift who pay out of pocket for the certification courses the hospital requires but does not fund. She stopped. I don't want money for myself. I want you to look at these people. Renato stayed quiet for a long time. That's harder than signing a check, he said. It was not an excuse. It was an honest observation. I know, she said. That's why I'm asking you and no one else. What happened in the months that followed was neither quick nor simple. Renato hired a consulting firm to map the working conditions of the hospital's lower-level employees. The result was a 94-page report that he read entirely, something his assistant said she had never seen happen with any document that was not financial. The hospital implemented full health insurance for all employees, regardless of position. It created a scholarship fund for assistants and technicians who wanted to continue their education. It reformed the leave policy for family situations. It did not become newspaper news. Renato did not want that. Katsura did not either. Dona Inez improved enough to spend afternoons sitting on the balcony. Katsura returned to medical school at night, with a scholarship created by the fund, one of the first recipients, although her name did not appear on any public list. Teo turned 7 at a small party, with chocolate cake and the drawing finally uncreased and framed on the bedroom wall. Katsura did not attend the party. But Renato appeared at the hospital reception one ordinary morning and handed her a small envelope, not money this time. It was a drawing. A curly-haired boy, a woman with a bandage on her arm, and underneath, in the handwriting of a child who still mixed uppercase and lowercase letters without any rule. For the blood lady. Thank you. Katsura folded the paper carefully and placed it in the pocket of her uniform. She walked to the east corridor, picked up the cart, and started her shift. Some things do not need an audience to be real. Some people save lives in silence, without cameras, without applause, without knowing that on the other side there is a whole human being who only continues to exist because of them. And the world rarely stops to thank them for that. But sometimes, not always, not with enough justice, but sometimes, someone sees. If this story touched you in some way, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell us in the comments what you thought, and which city or country you're watching from. Every comment makes a real difference here.